Hello everyone, welcome to my lesson 2 of my beginner's drawing tutorials. In this lesson we'll be going through rounded edges leading on from what we've done before, complex shapes which is more complicated and different from what we've done before, rendering options, that's like using pencils, pens, and I'll explain the pros and cons of those different drawing options. Rendering techniques, so the various ways that you could use those rendering options in practice, and then page layout, so for some handy tips on the best way to get your point across. So let's get to it. This is a cube I did earlier. It's the same sort of one as we did in lesson 1, but without anything on it, so then I can explain how to do rounded edges. So an example I've got is this measuring tape. As you can see, it's a bit more complicated than I would like. So with this, it's got various different sizes of radius going around it. What I would like to do is just have a constant radius, so like a quarter circle going all the way along. So I'll start off with this point here because it's the easiest one to do. So you make a little round at the top, and then you bring the vertical lines from where it touches the straight lines, bring those down. So those are your reference lines. So you do them lighter than all the rest because they just help to explain to the next person what is happening with your drawing. And then at the bottom, you round it like you did on the top. But this one is a bit fatter, like I said, with the perspective in the last lesson. And then the next one, you do this side, you start on the top, and then you bring your reference line down. Try and make it as vertical as possible. And then a small round at the bottom. So it's exactly the same as this one, but it looks different because it's on a different part of the drawing. So this cuts away that whole bit there now, so you're left with that line going there. So now if you do exactly the same on the other side, trying to do the same curve on this side, the same size, and then bring that down and then around at the bottom. You can then do the reference lines like you did on this one, but these are much closer to the line itself, like that. And then at the back, you do another line. So that has done those 4 corners now. Now what you'd like to do is do the top. So the way I do this is I do another curve on top of the side ones, but slightly taller and slightly smaller. So you do exactly the same as the other side. So that leaves that a little bit taller than the original line. And then, not that. Then on the back here, do the same curve but slightly taller, higher up, sorry. And then on this one, do the same but with a bit more distance because it's closer to you, so it looks bigger. And then you join all the lines up. This is quite hard, so you're going to have to do it quite slowly because otherwise it wants to join the groove of the previous line, and then it goes all a bit smudgy and weird. And then with this one, and that one, and then you can go over the lines again. And then some more reference lines that you can do are this one, going round, that one, and that one. And that just proves that that whole top is rounded now. It's not too much of a problem for the bottom. Most things, if they're on the ground like that, if they're resting on a table or something like that, you can't actually see the bottom round anyway. But also it's very hard to actually get that point across, so you may as well just leave that. So this is how to do basic rounds. If I try and do that with cylinders now, so with this screwdriver, you can see that top rounds over like that. If I can focus that, there we go. So that is like you did before. You do a center line, and then you do a circle, or a ellipse, sorry, and then you do a larger one, a bit thinner. For now, I'll just show you the back end because there's no point doing the whole thing. Bring that in. There we go. So that is very similar to that unscrewed like that. So if I put that back on again. So what you want to do, because that is that groove, you want to do another circle that's smaller to do that bit, and then you want another one that's even smaller to do that bit, and then you just loop them up on the corners, if that makes sense. So it's similar to what you did on the corners here. And then an extra small one, and then that rounds in like that. You can go over it thicker to make it all smooth again. Ooh, that went wrong. It doesn't matter if you go too far outside, like I did that little mistake. Because what I'll show you with the rendering, you can make up for those small mistakes. It's better to make the mistakes on the outside than it is to do on the inside, because you can't really cover those tracks. So that bit there, that's there for life now. Something to note, I am using a biro. That's what I've been taught in my degree. So we had to buy a pack of like 50 biros, and if they start to smudge, which mine, you can say that's smudge, yeah. If that starts to make little beads of ink in the corner, and if you go over with your hand and it smudges, it ruins the whole page that you could spend up to an hour on. So if it starts to bead with ink, you just dispose of that pen and get a new one. The reason that we use biros, and I still use it, is because it stops you stops you wanting to make mistakes. Because if you use pencils, then you can just get an eraser and rub it out and start again. If you use a pen, there's no going back. So yeah, it's a lot harder. So if you're just beginning, which you are if you're watching this video, I'd recommend using a pencil at first and then go into pens, because I much prefer pens. I think it has a better look at the end and it looks a lot cooler in a design page. But it does make like colouring pens and pro markers smudge a bit more, which could ruin your page if you're using light greys and using a black pen like I am, as I'll probably show you in a little while. Right, now I want to show you complex shapes. So complex shapes are different to what we were doing before. Before we were building everything out of a block or a cylinder. So this is an aftershave bottle that I've got. So this could either be done by using cylindrical, building out of a cylinder, because it's made out of lots and lots of cylinders really, and it just gradually goes across. Or you can do it the complex shape way, which is So you've got a plane, which if you just imagine it as a sheet of paper, it's that cut through there. So you've got the top coming into those parts there, so like that. And then for changing the color is around about there. Just remember, this is still going in 2-point perspective, so to a finite point there, so everything channels in. All the important features, such as the change in the size of the neck, you should probably do reference lines like I've done there. So it means that everything in that plane and in that plane, when it's cut through that way, all meet up, and you can draw it out well. Then you do a center line down the center. That also in 2-point perspective. This is drawing another rectangle, but you want it a similar size to the other one, just at 90 degrees. Therefore, everything is in the same proportion. What you'll do then is find where the rest of the reference lines cross that center line. Make it so it's a cross point where it crosses the center line for all those important features. Like that. So that means now you've got the cross section on that plane. Now you want the cross section on that plane. You can start doing the actual features now. So you know the top is there. The bottom is around about there. So then it gives you a bit of an indication as what you want to do. That comes out to that point. So I'll just hold my hand out there so I know which one I'm doing. Otherwise it gets quite confusing. Comes down to that point and then all the way out to there. To that point, and that comes out to there. And then you can also draw a circle that crosses all of those contact points with the ends. So you bring it out, because that's the furthest part that you would see, that line there coming down, and that comes down like that and joins with the circle at the bottom. This part here does exactly the same, comes down and joins the circle at the bottom. The reason I've chosen this as a complex form rather than the cylindrical way I was doing before is this bit at the bottom. So this is symmetrical apart about that point. I just thought it would be a good way to show how to show internal detail using this. So with glass, you can see from the outside. So you can see, oh, that's quite a cool little feature there. If I was doing that in cylindrical way I was doing before, it'd be very hard to make that look how it's meant to look. It's possible, but it's quite difficult. This way is difficult as well, but you can go a pointless about the central point, and then in that plane there, you can draw the center part, identify where it's going to contact the ends. So around about there and around about there. Bring it out like that. On the other plane, so that one, it's essentially the same. There we go. Should really meet up with a circle that's also on that bottom. So I've gone a bit too far with that one. Like that. There we go. And then that has an opening in this bit. Because that is quite an important feature, it's like the only thing that stands out apart from the branding on this, you don't want to draw it from that angle. Because that has no standing out parts on it. Also, it doesn't explain that you want that bit to be made. So showing it with that bit standing out means that the manufacturer or whoever's taken the product on will go, oh, right, I need to cut that bit out of that mold or whatever they want, really. So that bit comes straight across. So I want that to go straight across up to that point, and then I want to make that little curve at the top and then bring that out. And then the same up the top. It will come down a bit and back round. It's quite difficult to explain, but it just shows that that has a cutout in it like that, going through like there. So you wouldn't actually be able to see that unless you've done rendering, and rendering is like colouring in almost. You've rendered it so it looks like glass and you can see through it. I can come on to that later. So now I'm just going over extra details like that. Like that. So that's the top, that's that part, and that's that part, and then the added feature at the bottom. So that's not the greatest drawing I've ever done, but I think that should hopefully make a bit of sense on how to do complex shapes. So what I'd like to show you now is an example for rendering. So if you look at this box, I've got the light coming from this direction out my window. So you can see that side is brighter than that side. So that side has the shadow on it. So the simple way of doing this quickly is if you draw another cube, for example. Like that. So that bit would be the shadow part. So with this, it's called hatching. You just go across like that. So it's just to prove a point that that bit has shadow on it rather than that side. Shows the depth a bit more. So it shows it's a bit more of a 3D thing rather than just lines on a page. Another way of doing it is using a marker like I've got here. So if I draw another one, so if I want to shadow that side again, You just go on the outline of that. Sometimes less is more, so all I've done there is just one face and a bit darker where it gets darker, which it does with that. So you can't really see it right now because it's not dark enough on that side, but it does get darker in that corner because it's further away from the light. It's hidden behind the box itself. A lot of people would like to just colour in the whole thing. You can, but it has a tendency to be a bit too much. So I quite like a simple one colour. So similar to what I've got here. Basic outline of what it is. You can tell what it is from the outside. You don't need to go overboard with it. So if I was to draw it out again, so what you can do, and you can do this with Sharpie or any type of marker really, is just an outline really. That's all you need. And then you can bring in cross-hatching. Makes it look quite professional. So one thing you could do is on a massive page full of rectangles or cubes or whatever you have, whichever one you like most, you highlight the outside of it. It makes it stand out more to the reader. Another way to bring depth is having a back plate to it. So there's my ruler. Don't know where my ruler's gone. It's useful to have a straight line. Just a rectangle going over the back. So with this, you go round the outside, everywhere in that rectangle apart from your actual cube. And then you can, it's running out. You can do that with the thicker side as well. Like that. And then quite a good technique to do with that is that use a black marker. Go all the way outside with the thin nib. You can either go through the outside of your part, like that, and then with the thicker line, this is where all the outside lines should stand out. Like if you had some reference lines like that, they should be a lot softer than your actual outside lines because they don't really matter too much. It helps for the people reading your page, but for the actual shape of the product, it doesn't matter too much. This is also where you could, with the cross section stuff in the center with the reference lines, like I was explaining with the aftershave, you can prove that it's got internal features. Like if I had just a random box in the center or something like that, it almost looks like it's in there. And then with all of the reference lines, make it line up with the bottom lines in there, so it looks like it's at the bottom. It's a lot of playing around, really. It's just all a bit of trial and error. So those are various ways that you can do colour with either pencils, pens, or your actual pencil that you're drawing with, or your pen that you're drawing with. There are some other ways of doing it. So there are pastels, but personally I don't particularly like pastels or charcoal. They get all a bit smudgy, and the whole thing just chalk just gets everywhere, and it's very hard to rub off as well. So once you've smudged it, the whole page gets smudged essentially. Some other ones are Tipp-Ex. Tipp-Ex is quite a useful one. So if it has a shining beam of light that's going over here, if everything is coloured in, you can go over a little bit of Tipp-Ex along that line and a little dot or something like that. It just makes it look like that bit is the prime bit of shininess on that edge. So that's quite a nice little tip. You can use just white paint if you don't have Tipp-Ex. But you just use it with a pin and you just go over it. There's multiple other ways of doing it, but this is the way I prefer. Either one of these is just anything on your page that you want to make it stand out, just make it pop. So you want to be able to look at a page and go, wow, I like that one, because on this page that one stands out the most. As I said before, less is more usually. So if all of these were coloured in, I wouldn't know what is happening really, what to look at. So if I was you, this is actually a part of the page layout as well. Fill the page, try and do as bigger as you can to fill the page, because then you can go into finer details. What you can do every so often is a 2D, it's like from the side on or something like that. Just a fast little sketch just to go, that's a basic idea, and now I'm actually going to draw it out in big in 3D, because it's quite hard to draw stuff out in 3D which you don't know how it looks like. If you've got it in your head, it's easy enough drawing this because I can see it here. But if you got it in your head, it's easier to just go out in 2D, another side view, and then think, right, I can put that into 3D. Another one on page layout is arrows. So that is just practice really to get the perspective right. So that's a simple enough arrow. It's quite nice to have them in 3D. So if I'm showing that one goes forwards and out, can go in perspective with what you've drawn, which is also quite a neat thing. So like that, and then you can shade in the shadowy parts. You can make double-ended ones, so ones with arrows on the end. You can also, that is rotating through a center point there. What you can do, if you want to, you can go in perspective with what you've drawn, which is also quite a neat thing. So like that, and then you can shade in the shadowy parts. You can also, if you want to make double-ended ones, so ones with arrows on the end. You can also, if what you can do is the cylinder turned into a circular arrow. This takes a little bit more skill. So place a point there, halfway along, and then arrowhead there, back in until you hit the circle of either side. You want the end of the arrow about there, and then you want a smaller circle because this is thickened. So you want it about the same thickness. Draw that back in. And then do the thickness of that. That there as well. And then where the bottom of that is. No, I didn't explain that very well, but as I said before in the episode 1, with holes you can do cross hatching, which is very similar to this, but for the cylinders you do straight lines going with the actual the cylinder, and that just shows that it's spinning. So if I did that one there, I didn't put it there because I didn't have enough room and it looked too much happening. It'll just show that that one's gonna twist. And then if I want to do labels and annotations, when you're writing, you want it always to be horizontal. You don't want it at an angle. So if I want to say what the surface of this is, like if I want to say that's shiny or anything like that, I'd do a wiggle, an arrow pointing to it, and then go shiny, or internal feature, like that. Then it looks quite smart when it's all coming together, when you have a lot of stuff on the page. You don't have to do it in capitals, you don't have to do it in lowercase, it's whatever you want really. So I hope that this helps. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and then I'll hopefully get back to you. Yeah, just practice away and have fun is the main thing. So thank you very much for listening.